Hello and happy Monday, everyone. Welcome back to another book talk. I am AnnaLee Dragon, director of the Kinderhook Memorial Library, and I am here to do another weekly talk as I have been doing for years now. And that's not even like an exaggeration. It's been that long somehow. So this week I thought, since we are coming up on the new year, that we would talk about some of the best books of the last year of 2021, because I don't know about you, but I have not gotten to reading anywhere near the amount of books that have come out that I've wanted to read. And so I thought this would be a nice time to do like a little refresher. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list. There are tons and tons of best of lists that you can look at. What I did was I kind of combed through a number of those and tried to pick out some that were common to a lot of lists, because to me that just means they're overall popular, and so they might be of most interest to all of you. So I've got 6 or 7 books. I've got a few nonfiction and then a bunch of fiction. As usual, I'm going to probably do fiction first and then we'll hit nonfiction before we end. I will put up a cover of the book and then talk about that book, and then at the end I will put all of the covers again so you can get busy making your holds lists. I tried to stick to books too that we have here in our library. That way, if you are one of our patrons and there is a wait list, at least you're at the top of it, because you are only waiting behind our patrons for our copy. So with that said, let's get started with a little best books of 2021 list. Here we go. As you saw there, the first book I want to talk about is The Sentence by a very well-known author, Louise Erdrich. So Louise Erdrich has written just a number of books. She is hugely popular. And so whenever somebody like that comes out with a new book, I think a lot of people are interested. She also doesn't write constantly, so it's not like a James Patterson where there are new books coming out several times a year. She tends to only write one every year or two, and so it's a bigger deal when they come out. So The Sentence, it says here, is a hard-won love letter to readers and to booksellers, as well as a compelling story about how we cope with pain and fear, injustice, and illness. All unfortunately recurring themes in 2021 and 2020, I feel like. So it says it's one good way to press a beloved book into another's hands is one good way to help people. And I agree with that wholeheartedly as a librarian. So this is a New York Times bestselling novel. The author, Louise Erdrich, has won the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award before, and this is, they call it a wickedly funny ghost story, a tale of passion, of a complex marriage, and of a woman's relentless errors. So it asks what we owe to the living, the dead, to the reader, and to the book. A small independent bookstore in Minneapolis is haunted from November 2019 to November 2020 by the store's most annoying customer. Flora dies on All Souls Day, but she simply won't leave the store. Tookie, who has landed a job selling books after years of incarceration that she survived by reading with murderous attention, must solve the mystery of this haunting while at the same time trying to understand all that occurs in Minneapolis during a year of grief, astonishment, isolation, and furious reckoning. So it begins on All Souls Day in 2019 and ends on All Souls Day in 2020. And it says its mystery and proliferating ghost stories during this 1 year propel a narrative as rich, emotional, and profound as anything Louise Erdrich has written, which is saying a lot. So if you've read her other books and are a huge fan, I feel like this is one for you. There's a little magical realism in most of her books, which I really enjoy. So if that's your thing, and I just also think it hits on a lot of very current topical themes right now, which maybe is something you want and maybe it's not. I'm not, depending on if you're looking for escapism. If you are, we've got some other stuff. But this looks like an excellent read, and I know it's on my to read list, and it made many of the best of 2021 lists. Okay, next book. The next book is also by an author who many of you have heard of and have maybe read. Harlem Shuffle by Colson Whitehead, who wrote The Underground Railroad, and Nickel Boys is back with a new one here this year. So he is a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winning author. And they say that this is a gloriously entertaining novel of heist shakedowns and ripoffs set in Harlem in the 1960s. I did discuss this one during one of my book talks, I think maybe an unboxing or something, but I wanted to revisit because it's hit so many of the best books of the year lists. So it says that few people know that Ray Carney descends from a line of uptown hoods and crooks, and that his facade of normalcy has more than a few cracks in it. Cracks that are getting bigger all the time. So cash is tight, especially with all those installment plan sofas. So if his cousin Freddie occasionally drops off the odd ring or necklace, Ray doesn't ask where it comes from. He knows a discreet jeweler downtown who doesn't ask questions either. Then Freddie falls in with a crew who plans to rob a hotel and volunteers Ray's services as the fence. The heist doesn't go as planned. They rarely do. Now Ray has a new clientele, one made up of shady cops, vicious local gangsters, two-bit pornographers, and other assorted Harlem lowlifes. So thus begins the internal tussle between Ray and the striver and Ray the cook. So he's trying to beat out this, reputation or past that he has by being a good person, and now he's put in the situation where he's kind of having to fight between the two worlds again and make a choice. So it says that its ingenious story plays out in a beautifully recreated New York City of the early 1960s. It's a family saga masquerading as a crime novel, so a little something for everyone, a hilarious morality play, I think that's hard to accomplish, and a social novel about race and power, and ultimately a love letter to Harlem. So they say it's a fantastic novel. Everybody I know who's read this one has loved it. If you're looking for a little vintage New York City feel and or love Harlem as well, if you like mysteries, family stories, it sounds like it's kind of got a little of everything. So Harlem Shuffle by Colson Whitehead. Okay. Next book. Detransition Baby by Tori Peters is one that I also have mentioned in a previous book talk at some point during this year. Again, made a ton of the lists. So it says the lives of three women, transgender and cisgender, collide after an unexpected pregnancy forces them to confront their deepest desires in one of the most celebrated novels of the year. It says Reese almost had it all: a loving relationship with Amy, an apartment in New York City, a job she didn't hate. She had scraped together what previous generations of trans women could only dream of, a life of mundane bourgeoisie comforts. The only thing missing was a child. But then her girlfriend Amy detransitioned and became Ames, and everything fell apart. Now Reese is caught in a self-destructive pattern, avoiding her loneliness by sleeping with married men. Ames isn't happy either. He thought detransitioning to live as a man would make life easier, but that decision cost him his relationship, and losing that meant losing his only family. Even though their romance is over, he longs to find a way back to her. When Ames' boss and lover, Katrina, reveals that she's pregnant with his baby and that she's not sure whether she wants to keep it, Ames wonders if this is a chance he's been waiting for. Could the three of them form some kind of unconventional family and raise the baby together? So it's a debut novel, which is one of my favorite things. I love a new author, and it's, they call it provocative, emotional, messy, vulnerable, and that it's, brilliant also. Brilliantly and fearlessly navigates the most dangerous taboos around gender, sex, and relationships, giving us a thrillingly original, witty, and deeply moving novel. I love the whole idea of this book. I love that we're, giving representation to groups that are not traditionally represented in literature, and also that it's a very celebrated novel, so it's gaining wide acceptance, which I think is really awesome and exciting. It sounds like if you love a relationship drama, some difficult subject matter, the idea of womanhood in general being explored, I think this book sounds like an excellent and challenging read, and there's got to be a reason it made a ton of the best of lists for this year, with steep competition, as you can tell, as a debut author, to get that kind of attention in a year where there's all these famous Pulitzer Prize winners coming out with new books. That really speaks highly of it as well. So Detransition Baby by Tori Peters. Okay, next book. So the last work of fiction we're going to talk about today is Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. It's an unforgettable story of a daredevil female aviator determined to chart her own course in life at any cost. They say that this book soars and dips with dizzying flair, an expansive story that covers more than a century and seems to encapsulate the whole wide world. I love a sweeping saga, and I love that it's about a daredevil female aviator. Love a strong female main character. I think that's great. And J. Courtney Sullivan, the author of Friends and Strangers, says it's one of the best books they've ever read, which huge praise coming from another author, I think. So it says, after being rescued as infants from a sinking ocean liner in 1914, Marion and Jamie Graves are raised by their dissolute uncle in Missoula, Montana. There, after encountering a pair of barnstorming pilots passing through town in beat-up biplanes, Marion commences her lifelong love affair with flight. At 14, she drops out of school and finds an unexpected and dangerous patron in a wealthy bootlegger who provides a plane and subsidizes her lessons, an arrangement that will haunt her for the rest of her life, even as it allows her to fulfill her destiny, circumnavigating the globe by flying over the North and South Poles. And then it cuts to a century later, where they have somebody cast to play this woman Marion in a film that centers on her disappearance in Antarctica. So it's got all of the things. Adventure, for those of us who are armchair adventurers like I am, it sounds like there's some historical elements to it, with the bootlegging and the time and the circumnavigating the globe. It just sounds like it's got all of the things, and I'm really excited to read this one. I somehow did not catch it when it came around, but it is now on my list, as I hope it will be on yours. So Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. Now we're going to get into some nonfiction for you. Empire of Pain, The Secret History of the Sackler Dynasty by Patrick Radden Keefe is another one that made pretty much every list that I looked at for best of this year. You know, New York Times, NPR, a bunch of literary ones. So this has made a lot of waves. And for nonfiction, that is harder, I would argue. It's a lot easier to sell fiction books than it is to sell nonfiction books. So that says a lot about it. This is the grand, devastating portrait of 3 generations of the Sackler family, famed for their philanthropy, whose fortune was built by Valium and whose reputation was destroyed by OxyContin. From the prize-winning and best-selling author of Say Nothing. So they say that the history of the Sackler dynasty is rife with drama, as one would suppose by any giant family like this that's made such a name for themselves. Baroque personal lives, bitter disputes over estates, fistfights in boardrooms, glittering art collections, Machiavellian courtroom maneuvers, and the calculated use of money to burnish reputations and crush the less powerful. So there's a huge story here it's about the 3 brothers, mainly 3 doctor brothers, Raymond, Mortimer, and Arthur, who weathered the poverty of the Great Depression and appalling anti-Semitism. So you're kind of initially rooting for them. But then one of them was working at a mental institution, which he considered barbaric, and saw a better way to conduct research on drug treatments. And that's where Valium comes from. But then, of course, later on, the template they used to become so rich and famous from Valium, which was co-opting doctors, influencing the FDA, downplaying drugs' addictiveness, is what they used to launch the far more potent product, OxyContin, which went on to generate $35 billion in revenue and launch a public health crisis in which hundreds of thousands would die. So this is not a fun story, I don't think, but if you love a good tell-all documentary kind of thing, I think this is that along those lines. So I don't know if you've seen Dope Sick or any of those kind of documentaries, which are hard to watch but also enthralling. I feel like this is that same vein. It says that it's a masterpiece of narrative, reporting, and writing, exhaustively documented and ferociously compelling. It's a portrait of the excesses of America's second Gilded Age and a study of impunity among the super elite and relentless investigation of the naked greed and indifference to human suffering that built one of the world's greatest fortunes. So again, while it's not a fun read necessarily, this is something that I would love to know more about, and it sounds like it's all about the storyteller, and it sounds like Patrick Radden Keefe did a fantastic job at this, which makes me want to read more about it. And I think that's the sign of good nonfiction, when you already know the story somewhat and you still want to read it and find it compelling. Empire of Pain by Patrick Radden Keefe. Okay, next book. All right, How the Word is Passed, A Reckoning with the History of Slavery Across America. So again, not going to be an easy read. The author is Clint Smith, and it says that beginning in his hometown in New Orleans, Clint Smith leads the reader on an unforgettable tour of monuments and landmarks, those that are honest about the past and those that are not, that offer an intergenerational story of how slavery has been central in shaping our nation's collective history and ourselves. So I think that this is a topical book, and again, made a ton of the lists. So there's something there that's very compelling and well written. It says it's informed by scholarship and brought to life by the story of people living today. Smith's debut work of nonfiction, again, love a debut, is a landmark of reflection and insight that offers a new understanding of the hopeful role that memory and history can play in making sense of our country and how it's come to be. So I think, if we don't learn from our past, we're doomed to repeat it. And I think that's why works like this are so important. And again, a debut work making a best of list like this amongst all these giants is a huge deal. So if you're looking for a little history, especially American history, How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith might be the next great read for you. Okay, I have one more for you and then we're done for the week. So I thought we'd end with a memoir. I know I have lots of memoir biography readers out there, and so I wanted to pull at least one. There are many great ones that were written this year, but we're going to talk about Somebody's Daughter by Ashley Ford. It says Glennon Doyle, who is one of my favorite writers, says that this is a book that people will be talking about forever, which huge praise. It says that this is a wrenchingly brilliant memoir and truly a classic in the making. The writing is so richly observed and so suffused with love and yearning that I kept forgetting to breathe while reading it. Anything that can move you like that in a book is worth picking up, in my opinion. So it says that one of the most prominent voices of her generation debuts with an extraordinarily powerful memoir, the story of a childhood defined by the looming absence of her incarcerated father. Through poverty and adolescence and a fraught relationship with her mother, Ashley wishes she could turn to her father for hope and encouragement. There are just a few problems. He's in prison, and she doesn't know what he did to end up there. She doesn't know how to deal with the incessant worries that keep her up at night, or how to handle the changes in her body that draw unwanted attention from men. In her search for unconditional love, Ashley begins dating a boy her mother hates. I mean, who hasn't done that? When the relationship turns sour, he assaults her. Still reeling from that, which she keeps secret from her family, she desperately searches for meaning in the chaos. Then her grandmother reveals the truth about her father's incarceration, and Ashley's entire world is turned upside down. So it says it steps into the world of growing up a poor Black girl in Indiana with a family fragmented by incarceration, and exploring how isolating and complex such a childhood can be. As Ashley battles her body and her environment, she embarks on a powerful journey to find the threads between who she is and what she was born into, and the complicated familial love that binds them. So while, again, some of these are heavy subjects, I didn't pick them as the most uplifting reads necessarily. I picked them because they are renowned across the board. They have made multiple lists of the best of for the year, and I wanted to make sure that none of them slipped under your radar because they all seem really important. Oftentimes, the difficult books are the important ones. So I know that some of these are a little harder, but hopefully some of the fiction is a little lighter and happier. But I really hope that you'll check out some of these books and make sure that you didn't miss any or put them on your to-read list. Mine is forever growing. And I will be back in a few weeks with some more books for you. And if there's anything we can do for you in the meantime, please don't hesitate to ask. And here's to hoping for a great 2022 for everyone. I'll talk with you all soon. Bye, everyone.